What is up, brand builders? Stephen Hurahan here on the Brand Master Podcast. And in this episode, I am delighted to have the one, the only Mr. Chris Do on the show, who shares his insights about how to grow your creative agency. Now, if you don't know who Chris is, he's an Emmy award-winning designer, director, CEO, and chief strategist of Blind. He's the founder of the Futur, an online education platform with a mission of teaching 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. He also sits on multiple boards and he's taught sequential design at multiple colleges and has lectured all over the world. So yeah, when it comes to creativity and the business of design, Chris Do is a real life master. Now, I really enjoyed this episode. It felt like a chat in a bar over a beer, and Chris opened up about his early days in the agency world, scraping through contacts to find clients, and his top 3 things that he would do if he had to go back and start at the bottom. So if you're a freelancer or an agency owner, you're not going to want to miss the value bombs that Chris shares on this episode of the Brand Master Podcast. You can probably see by the childish smile on my face, I'm absolutely delighted and privileged to have the one and only Mr. Chris Do on the show. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
It is my absolute pleasure, Stephen, and thank you for your patience with me as I work through some of my personal issues.
No problem. That Chris just came back from the dentist, but I was delighted to find out that he didn't have any anesthetic, so we're good to go. Now, for those of you who don't know Chris Do, I would imagine that most of the people who know me know Chris because we're in and around the same circles. But obviously, Chris is on a much bigger scale. He's been a content machine now for the past 7 years or so. He's just been cranking it out, and he's filled this gap that has been gaping for such a long time, which is to help freelancers, creatives to learn the business of creativity. And the Futur has just taken off, and it's been great to see. It's been great to see not just the help that has gone out there with the free content that really, in some cases could be charged for, but the help that it's offered the community and to fill that gap from what is, I think we can all agree, kind of a fractured education system. So I think that's been really, really great to see. Now, for those of you who do not know Chris, there is a great episode on the Futur podcast. I think it's episode 117 where Chris goes through his origin story. Annalie is interviewing him, and it's a great episode. Actually, I just re-listened to it recently on the build up to this. And Chris, you're a great storyteller. You draw people in, you give that detail, and it was the story of kind of having to leave Vietnam, because of war, going over to the States, kind of being, impoverished and kind of having to kind of come up out of that, and to get a scholarship into a prestigious art school, and then realizing at that point that you had a real talent. So if you do have the time to go and listen to that show, I definitely recommend it. It's not just, it's entertaining because there's some candid moments in there. Chris shares about, struggles that he went through. It's a great episode. And where I'd like to actually pick it up with you, Chris, is kind of from that moment, from the moment you kind of started to realize that you had a talent and you were coming out of art school, to the point that you said to yourself, okay, I think I'm going to do something on my own here. I'm going to start my own business. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey from there to the moment that you decided to start your own business?
Okay, so I want to make sure I answer the right question, because I've been thinking about entrepreneurship for a very long time, from a very young person, but I didn't know it was called entrepreneurship. It was just like, how do you make an extra buck? Because I want to have financial freedom. Even as a kid, I was like finding something to sell. So in terms of your specific question, what time period are you looking for, so I can make sure I answer that question?
Okay, so you leave school. You've got your credentials. Obviously, there's going to be some experience gained in the meantime, and the realization that I can turn this talent that I have and this experience that I have into a business. So really about that journey and that kind of realization and that moment that you decided not to become an entrepreneur, but to just turn what you had into an entity in and of itself.
Okay, perfect. I've always desired to be able to be self-directed, but I didn't know it was going to happen in the way that it happened. And I think it might be worthwhile to kind of spend a moment to share kind of the time and place in which I'm operating in, so that people have some context.
Mm-hmm.
While I was still finishing up a school, I had an opportunity to work at an ad agency. So this is the semester right before I'm about to graduate. I get this opportunity to go and work at an ad agency. So I take that and I spend 3.5 months there, and then they offer me a job, and I'm still kind of like a full-time freelancer. I have a salary. I don't have all the benefits, but I'm going back to school now, and I'm flying back and forth from Los Angeles to Seattle every other week, it seems like. And I'm feeling like I'm living in some kind of Hollywood film right now, because I don't have any concern about getting a job. And I'm working at this great ad agency. They're taking really good care of me. They put me up in a corporate apartment. I have an expense account. Everything that you could think of with advertising agencies, I got.
Mm.
And somewhere along the way, I was like, this is not the right place for me. I'm a designer. I want to design things. And with advertising, it's about simplicity of execution, because all the design stuff gets in the way of the communication.
Mm.
And so I was feeling like I'm this racehorse that came into the track, but they're only running me at 5 miles an hour.
Mm.
So ultimately, I quit, finished school, and think, now what am I going to do with my life? I hadn't prepared for any of the on-campus interviews, which you're supposed to, because in my mind, I was thinking, I'm going to go work for the ad agency.
Mm.
So I blow all this stuff off, and now I graduate. I'm like, what's supposed to happen? I missed all of the orientation, the senior portfolio thing. I missed all of it, every single part. And so the only thing I can think of is, let me find another job.
Mm.
So I go and work for Epitaph Records, mostly because one person that I knew from school was the creative director. His name is Fred Hidalgo. He's amazing. He's a brilliant person. I get that job. A month and a half in, he gets fired, and I'm like, I got to get out of here, because the only reason why I'm here was to work underneath him and to learn from him. So I quit and I freelance. So it's now I'm starting to enter like the real job market, and I'm starting to figure out I need to become some kind of entity, because I've tried corporate America in advertising. I've tried the punk rock music scene, and neither of those two things worked for me for different reasons. And so I feel like now the only way forward is to figure out how to start my own company. So I'm plotting in my mind, like, at what point will I know that I'm ready? Coincidentally, this is a matter of a few months here. Like 3 months after graduating from school, my uncle calls me up. He says, I know since a kid you've always wanted to create your own company. I know you just finished school. Do you want to start a business? Because I have a business partner who wants to invest in a design company. It's like things are just falling in my lap now. Yeah. So he calls me up, and I'm like, yeah. So he says, put together a business plan. Didn't know what one was. Meet us at the Westin Bonaventure in downtown Los Angeles. This is in 1995. And I meet with him and his business partner. He's a real estate developer. He builds hotels. So this is not just like some little thing. I remember staying up for nights prior to presenting on this business plan with 3-5 year projections. I called up an investment banker, a friend of mine, I guess my friend's father, who was in that space. He guided me through the process. I sit down and meet with him. He does what most business people do. He flips through it just to make sure you've done something. He puts it away, and he goes, let's do business. He reaches in his coat pocket. He pulls out a checkbook. On the spot, while we're still having dinner, he writes me a check for $10,000. Writes me a check right on the spot. I think it was $10,000. I might be messing this part up. And he signs it, and he tears it out and he gives it to me. He's like, this is a good faith gesture. We don't even have a deal, Stephen. I don't know what I'm getting into. This is the first time, literally the first time I've met this person, and they're already writing me a check. And I'm feeling like I have a rabbit's foot stuck up my butt or something, because things just seem to happen.
Well, that's, I mean, I was going to ask a question later on. Was there ever part of the steep learning curve where you felt out of your depth? But I think it's better to bring that question forward now, because obviously you must have been, really stressed. You must have been thinking, I can't do this. What were you going through when you were preparing for all of this?
Yeah, I think people who are really successful are usually one of two things. One is they're really talented and they know what they're doing. And two, they're just dumb enough not to think they can fail. I fit into the latter of the two categories. So I'm aware, but I'm not so aware. I have belief. And I just think it doesn't this happen for everybody? You know, you go
Mm,
to school, you get some person to cut you a check, and now you think about it, I think it was $5,000. It was a lot of money back then for me. I was like, holy cow, who does this?
mm.
So I'm not afraid of starting a business. I think, and falsely so, that talent will take me there. I mean, so far talent's opened all kinds of doors for me. So why would I believe otherwise, right? Something just pinged me. Did you hear that? Let me close that. So I'm just thinking, look, I'm not even out of school. I get a job in advertising. I finish school. I don't prepare for anything. I get another job in the entertainment space. I'm freelancing around town. And before I know, a business opportunity presents itself. So I'm not so worried yet. I have this
Mm.
money, and that's enough. I basically put in my notice. I finish up my booking, and then I start this company. And I'm in business for myself. I go to the bank. I do a DBA, doing business as. I file like the city tax and license and all that kind of stuff. I'm in business, except for I have one huge problem. I have 0 clients. I don't know how to get clients. I don't know how to do project estimating. I don't know how to do the conference call to procure new work. All I know is how to design.
So there you are. You've got a $10,000 check. You've just opened up. You're in business. Where do you go to from there? Where do you know where to spend your money? Where do you know where to invest your time? How do you go out and get that first client? Because you don't know any of this. How did you figure all that out?
Yes. So the reason why I gave that context for you is because all of my first clients came from people I just recently worked with. So the
Hmm.
people I knew at the ad agency sent me work. The people I just graduated with, some of them got jobs eventually and found ways to bring back work to me.
Hmm.
The music label company, some of the people who worked there hired me to do some independent contracting freelance work. And where I was freelancing around town, they still called me, and now it was under my terms. So this was a very different shift from being a freelancer who's trading my time for money to being an independent contractor, because I was just working remotely now.
Mm.
And of course, I'm an enterprising young person at that point. So as soon as I get work, I'm calling up friends. I need help because I'm getting more leads, more opportunities to work than I can physically do instantly,
Mm.
right? And here's the tip I want to give to anybody listening to this. When you work somewhere, whether it's full-time freelance, whatever it is that you're doing, independent contractor, and make an impression on people so that they remember you. Be unforgettable in that way, and that will be your number one source for leads.
I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced this interviewing you before, but you, I've got a lot of questions lined up, and it just seems that you progressively answer them because you know what's next. So, and that was, leading into getting your first clients. Um, Obviously, when we have small business owners starting out, now most of them, they don't have the added pressure that you had of having an investor and having to answer to those, but they do have the pressures of having to put food on the table. They might have kids at home, and of course that's a pressure in and of itself. When first time entrepreneurs or freelancers go out into the market and they have that moment of, oh no, I need to get clients fast, how much weight would you put on turning around and tapping into the existing network that you already have as the starting point to get things rolling?
Yeah, great question. I think there's 2 ways to get business. There is the slowly planting and building relationships so
Hmm.
that when you need business, business is already coming to you. Or I decided today I'm going to start doing business and now I need to do business development. So again, I'm going to take it back to school. So when I was in school, I worked with a number of people, sometimes for money, and most of the times just to help each other out. Sometimes I didn't get paid. Actually, most of the times I did not get paid, but I was building a relationship with people. I was making an impression on people. So
Hmm.
when those same people went out of graduated, finished school, and they went on to their career, they remembered me. They remembered the impression. And I know you talk a lot about branding. So this is me brand building without even knowing what that word is.
Hmm.
And so some of my earliest leads came from former bosses, coworkers. They hired
Hmm.
me to work on a commercial for K2 skis. I got to work on a Nike job just 2 years out of school, a massive soccer project, because they're like, you're good with type. I think you now said you're starting a design and production company. I got some work. Why don't you do it? Because I just trust you. And people want to help people out that they like, right? And that they trust. And that's what I was doing. I got to work on a Buick car commercial because somebody that I went to school with became a director, and they got opportunities, and they recommended me to their friends and their editors. So when they cut the commercials, they're like, who do you know who could do this?
Mm.
And that's how I got those opportunities. So at this point, I have zero biz dev skills. I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know anything about sales. And it's just because of the impression I've been able to make prior to that.
Yeah, and I have found this through my own experience as well. But the more I talk with very successful people, the more the commonalities appear. One that comes to mind is Michael Janda. He got the likes of Google, Nintendo, big companies, because he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and he lives by the philosophy: be nice to people, and that comes back to you. So certainly as you go throughout your career, being nice to people, helping people, being a giver and not a taker, that all comes back. And it's the whole karma thing. But really starting off at the beginning and turning around, if you don't have any clients at the moment, and looking at the people in and around your network, that is such a great way to get started. And if Chris Do is getting started that way, if the likes of Michael Janda is getting started that way, then you can get started that way as well. Now, one thing you touched on just very, very briefly was how quickly you started to bring people into your world. And you did this through, to turning around to your friends, because you had more work than you knew what to do with. So as going from, solopreneur, Christo, of course, you had these investors behind you. How did you first start to grow your team? And what were the first kind of tasks that you let go of, that you were comfortable to let go of?
Really good question. And this will shock or surprise a few people, in that when I left these companies, either in a freelance or full-time capacity, they knew that I was on my own. And so they just reached out to me and said, hey, Chris, I never got the opportunity to work with you. We need to develop some identities for these on-air brands. I'm like, great, here's my rate. And as soon as I got the work, I called up my friends, because I was already kind of thinking like that I need to delegate this work. Mm-hmm. So I'm not even a couple of months out of school, getting opportunities and just hiring my friends as fast as I could. Just calling up people like, how are you happy with the job that you're at right now? Because I'd love to work with you. I remember you from school. And so that's who my initial team were. They're all classmates, and they all happen to be women, by the way, but they would eventually either quit their job or they were on like in between jobs. So like, I'll come and help you. And so I would just feed them the work. And we had this kind of very egalitarian way of working where, you know what, you work this much, you should take this percentage of the job. Mm-hmm. And I'll take some of the management, the money, the leftover, if you will. And it just worked out really beautifully. So I was delegating from the jump. What I was doing was, there were these people who were really good, but not as, say, good at me at doing what I do. Mm-hmm. So they would show me ideas. I would art direct it. And it's like, this is a little bit off the brief, and why don't you try these ideas? And they would work on that while I just continued to manage client relationships. Mm-hmm. And when they were done with the day, they would put their files on the server. I would open them up. I'm like, okay, these look good. I'm going to curate which ones I want to share with the client. I'll make some tweaks here and there. And my friends were really cool. When they saw the changes I made, they weren't offended. They were like, wow, I like those improvements. I like the changes that you made. And we learned and grew together.
And that's something that kind of strikes me, because how much of that do you think was natural? That just that instinct to delegate immediately? Because I know from everybody who I talk to, and from my own initial struggles with growth, it was that feeling that I needed to do everything. And I know that cripples so many designers, so many freelancers, so many creatives. They get to a point where their pipeline is full. They have people who want to work with them, and they cannot let go of that need to be in every area of their business. Do you think it is a natural thing that you just immediately started to delegate? And if you were crippled by that need, how would you start to let go of that?
Great question. So if I tell you a little bit about my past, and it'll seem very obvious, and then we can talk about like how one adopts that kind of mindset. Mm-hmm. So when I was in junior high, this is pre these bulk discounters where you can buy like candy at bulk prices.
Yeah.
My uncle, he owned a liquor store and they had candy. So I would say, to my cousin, hey, can I buy these at wholesale from you? He's like, yeah, of course you can. So he made no money. I just put in an order, like, here's all I want. And they had the really good candy, not the kind of candy you can get at school. And so he would give me the box. I would go to school, and I'm a really shy person, so I don't really want to sell the candy. So I just hire classmates. I'm like, you want to sell the candy? And then they're like, yeah. So I said, here's what I'm giving you. I need this amount back. And then this is what you're going to make, and this is what I'm going to keep. And it was working really well. And I didn't want to get in trouble because I wasn't sure if this was 100% legal at school, And what kids would do is my friends from junior high, they would eat the candy and throw the boxes, the wrapper on the floor. So I paid another kid to pick it up because I don't want to get in trouble. So everybody worked. And so it was a little ecosystem, and it was going really well. Yeah. So like I said, I'm an enterprising young person. The problem here, and the lesson I learned, was my supply chain was very inconsistent because my cousin didn't always go to work because he was my age, So
Yeah.
he'd only go to the liquor store every once in a while and put in the order. So I had massive supply chain problems there. I'm like, you know what? This is not working. I had to figure out something else. And the profit margin, even back then for me, was not enough. I need to sell something that has a huge profit margin. So I move into selling something else, which I know I'm not supposed to do. Which you know where this is going, right? I sold Ninja Stars. I sold Ninja Stars, and that was really great because the profit margin was awesome, except for it wasn't legal. I'll jump forward to high school. I go and work for a guy who does silk screening. I'm in my senior year in high school, and I was working for him as an inker. I would trace over his drawings in a rapidograph pen, cut ruby lith, and do all the color separations. And he paid me a lot of money. He paid me, at that time, $18 an hour, which I'm like, this is freaking great. Wow. I can make a living doing this. Except for I realized something. One day I'm working for him, freelancer. I asked him, like, could I order shirts from you? Like, how much does it cost? And he says, well, they're $5.25 a shirt. And I said, what are the other costs? He goes, that's it. Is there a minimum? He goes, yeah, like 20 shirts. So I'm thinking, this is great. I'm working too hard to make this money. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to school. I'm going to find clubs or groups of people who need t-shirts designed. I would design them, and then I'll hire my former boss to print them. I'll collect the difference between the two. So I just sold the shirts for $20 a shirt. I got charged $5.25 for them, and that's how I made money. So you're going to see that there's a pattern of behavior here, and most of it is influenced from this one book. My older brother, his name is Arthur, and he's 4 years older than me. He's like, hey, kid, you might like this book. He throws his book at me, and it's The Adventures of the Great Brain, written by Tom Fitzgerald.
I've never heard of it.
Yes. So this is a classic, okay? And it's an old book, and it's these kids who grew up in like Utah, like during early like, what is it, 20th century, like early 1900s here. And it's simple way of life, like where a penny would get you a lot. And Tom, the Great Brain, or John, or one of those things, one of the brothers, he was always thinking about how to swindle kids out of money. He would create a carnival. He would do all kinds of stuff. And my brother gave me that book because he knew that I was going to fuel my drive to build a business. And in these little kids' books, it was the blueprint. This is how you make money.
It sounds like The Richest Man in Babylon. I don't know if you read that book, but it's a very kind of similar thing. And it's based on the, just the basic principles of money. And that's obviously the basic principles of entrepreneurship or building a business. And I think, really that is the missing piece for so many people, is that ability to delegate and to let go of those tasks. So if someone was crippled in that state, what would you ask them to look at as the first step to letting go of tasks, just to kind of the litmus test, dipping their toe in the water to see how this feels?
Yes, I'm going to make a logical argument, and I understand this is an irrational attachment. Okay, so we'll try to work through this. So here's the logic. And my business coach told me this before. Typically, we're afraid to hire people because of a couple different reasons. One is we don't like to fire people. Creative people are not risk averse. We don't want to bring up anything that could be conflict. Like there's a conflict, so we're going to avoid it. So we're conflict averse. So he taught me how to fire people, so I would have the courage to hire them. That's number one. Number two is we have this belief that no one will do it as well as we can. So I want to tackle this on two fronts. Number one, is it's true. Right now, when you hire somebody, they're not going to be as good as you. But when you hire two people who are like, say, 80% of your skill level, that's 160% of who you are. And with this art direction and leadership and management, you can get that to your level.
Mm-hmm.
And so being an entrepreneur, in my mind, is being a good mentor and a teacher. If you think of yourself like that, then you can do this. Number 3 is when you say people are not as good as you, it's because you're not paying enough, you're not hiring better. Guy Kawasaki talks about this in lessons that he learned from Apple. He says that A players hire A players. B players hire C players because they're afraid. They hire people less than them because they don't want to be shown up. Now, if I were to ask any listener here, whatever it is that you think you're really good at doing, are you saying no one on earth can do it better than you? And that's where the conversation stops. Yes, of course there are people better than you. So why not build into your budget enough padding that you can actually hire the best in the world? I don't mean this as some kind of conceptual exercise. I mean this for real. When I used to make commercials and music videos for a living, we had so much money in the budget that I can actually hire the person who worked on a feature film that you love, who was the technical director, because that's the best person. Like, we can hire the best, not in town, but the best in the world. And that way we can ensure to the client that we're doing the very best that we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's, within what you're saying there, there's the whole scarcity abundance mentality at play as well. And if you just kind of allow yourself to have that sense of abundance, and you know, you're not afraid of you know, where the next one is coming from, then you can kind of be a little, and it does take some guts. It does take a little bit of bravery to do that. But it's a glass ceiling that so many people are stuck with, because they never get past that challenge. They never get past that hurdle of, you know, trying on for size, what it feels like to bring somebody into your business to do just a small task. And if they can do a small task, then you can bring somebody in to do a bigger task, and all of a sudden you're stepping away. So I think it's you know, it's something that I hear of time and again, and I think there's some great tips in there for people to take away. Now, when it comes to how you grew, obviously there's a lot of, I think you hit the snowball effect of referrals, and for some people it happens that way, and you know, for some people that snowball keeps going. For other people, you know, they get referrals and then they don't get that momentum, and they don't get that snowball. So you know, they hit that point of marketing and kind of going out there. Did you ever have to go to market to actually do active marketing? Or did you ride that snowball all the way to success?
There are periods in the history of both companies where I've had to go out and drum up work, for sure. And so this is not just, well, once you get on the positive side of things, you can just sit back and relax and everything works out. So there's a period in time when the work did come in. You tap into the friends and family network and the friends of friends network, and eventually that's going to dry up, right? Because if anyone hits pause, or they have another option, or they don't have a creative thing for you to work on, eventually you're going to run out of people to talk to. And so I remember, I think it was about a year and a half into my business, I have 4 or 5 people working for me on a full-time freelance basis. And I'm like, oh my God, we have no work. What am I going to do? And so I picked up the phone. I literally looked in a directory and called up a bunch of sales reps. And these are people who represent directors and production companies for work. I called every single one of them, and I sent them my you know, professional, quote unquote, not that professional, reel. And each and every single one of them just turned me down right after the other. It's like, I remember a woman, her name is Shaban, and she's like, Chris, really like your work. I just don't know what to do with you. And that was a very polite way of saying, your work is not very commercially viable. I don't know how to get work for you, although I recognize that you have some talent, right? And so after making these calls, I'm like, oh, I'm out of options. And so we sat around at the conference table, which was a door with sawhorses, you know, just want to let everybody know that was a conference room table. And I said, does anybody know anyone that might be able to give us work? And I remember this woman, and she was our office manager, and she was at that time dating one of my friends from school. Her name is Patricia. Patricia says, Chris, I know somebody. And Patricia is not in the industry. She doesn't know any of this stuff. I'm like, oh God, is this going to work? She goes, yeah, I know someone. Her name's Karen, and she works at this agency. I can get us a meeting. And I'm like, okay, awesome. She was the only one who said, I know somebody, let's talk to them. I go into that agency. I present my work to, her name's Karen Costello, tiny agency. I show her the work. She's very polite. She looks at it and it's like, oh, very nice. Okay, thanks. And I close up the portfolio. We leave and I'm thinking, oh, what a waste of time. This is the wrong person. She doesn't like the work, whatever. Little did I know that Karen would soon be poached by another agency who was on the upswing, and she was going to work on the Mitsubishi Motors account. So Karen, unbeknownst to me, a couple months later, calls me up and says, Chris, we got something to look at. Do you want to try this thing? I'm like, sure. I wind up doing that job. It wasn't the greatest of experience, but then she came back and said, you know what? We'd like to have you work on the entire campaign now.
Wow.
So yeah, I've had to go out and hustle. I'm not good at it. And I tell myself all kinds of stories. And this is the lesson to learn here, which is you never know what the other person is thinking. So stay out of the results business. Focus on the process. Did you call up enough prospects today?
Yeah.
Did you do your best, prepare for the meeting, and were utterly professional and polite and did your best? After that, you stay out of the results business because you never know what people are actually thinking or saying or doing long after you leave.
And again, this is just the same patterns that we see time and again. Like the more successful people you speak to, the more stories you hear. Even Richard, the story that you just told me reminded me of Richard Branson when he was sitting down when it was Virgin Atlantic, and he had his group around him, just hustling, just trying to find that next dollar. And you know, if the most successful people in the world have gone through this as well, then you know it shouldn't be you know, beneath anybody else to just roll up the sleeves and just think about this. You know, where can we get business? You know, who can we ask? Who can we pick up the phone and call? And it's just really that resourcefulness and that you know, that ability to kind of survive, that survival instinct to really do what it takes to go out and get business. So it doesn't always need a fancy funnel, and you can kind of get caught in the weeds a little bit there, especially if you're at the point where there is not too much business coming in. You know, sometimes it's just about hustling. Sometimes it's just about rolling up those sleeves and picking up the phone and asking those people. And as you said, you know, you don't know what door it's going to open next, because you know so many great projects have come from stories like that. And again, I'm just hearing this stuff time and again. Now, when it comes to the progression of the growth of your business, at what point did you say to yourself, okay, you know, we're growing, we've got referral business coming in, we've got, you know, freelancers on the books, but I need systems in place and I need processes in place. At what point did you turn to your business and start looking at it as this kind of machine that needs processes and systems?
Yeah, I described the early years of our business as we're going to jump out of the airplane and build a parachute on the way down. So it's a little bit sloppy. For example, I actually got clients before I got my business license. I started collecting payment before I hired an accountant, before I got legal. You know, it was all these things because sometimes we can overthink, overplan, overprepare, and our business goes in a totally different direction, or we use up all the capital that we need to stay in business. So it was about cash flow management, just extending the runway. So I'll admit this, I'm not proud of this. I used bootleg typefaces before I paid for them. And when we made some money, I bought the entire Adobe font collection. I just did. It was like $8,000. It was a lot of money back then. I'm like, we just now own this. And it was just like, I had some bootleg copies of the software and a few legitimate copies. And so you just kind of do that. And I think a lot of people, when they're starting business, you might go to a school that teaches you, here's how you run a business. And I'm telling you right now, in the real world, unless you're finance, unless you have a lot of money, it doesn't really work like that. You start calling up clients today before you have the business cards printed. You don't need to hire an accountant to set up all your books, although that one I might have you do first, because it sets up a pattern that is kind of sometimes hard to do. You know, so if you're in accrual or a cash-based accounting system, it can totally mess up your system. So there's a handful of things, but don't get overburdened with systems and protocols. Here's the other thing. I have a friend, his name is Mo. He's been on the channel many times. So Mo is the kind of guy who's barely a couple of years into his business and he's constantly learning and evolving, he's trying to systematize everything before he even sees the pattern. I think we're trying to be too efficient before we actually even know what the heck we're doing. And so, you know what? You know how I learned to build file structures for my projects? When a freelancer came in and he's like, okay, I finished the work. I copied it to the server. I'm like, great, thanks so much. And then I look at his project folder system. I'm like, this is great. Then I went in, copied that folder set. I removed all the assets, renamed it for what we need. And I said, okay, everybody, here's the new template.
Yeah.
So that's how that system was invented, because a freelancer who had been freelancing longer at bigger companies brought that system to us. Bidding, I just used like a page layout program to do my bidding until a freelance producer came in and used a spreadsheet. Like, go figure. So we're now using Excel. And now from that point forward, we're using Excel to build our bids because there's no mistake in terms of the math. Whereas before, sometimes I would mess up on the bids.
Yeah, and I think really the kind of undertone of that is that, you know, when you just kind of roll up your sleeves and get in there and learn on the basis of the mistakes that you make, the quote from Mike Tyson always comes back, which is that everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And getting punched in the face through your business, learning those learning through mistakes, falling down, picking yourself up, finding file systems here and there. Sometimes that's how you kind of build your business. You just add a piece here and add a piece there. Over time, of course, systems are important, but you can pick up different systems along the way. When it came to kind of progressing what you did now, I speak a lot about branding and brand strategy, and for me anyway, it just felt like this organic, natural progression, because I was doing things for clients, and I start to ask these kind of questions, these bigger questions, and it was just like this thread that I kept pulling at, and that seems to be the natural progression, certainly for those outside of the agency world, kind of freelancing because they're working directly with clients. Is that how strategy kind of came into your world and landed on your map by just pulling that thread and asking those bigger questions?
No, not at all. I love that we have different stories about how we figured this stuff out, right?
Yeah.
So for over 2 decades, I made commercials and I worked for ad agencies. So they figured out the bigger strategy, the marketing strategy, and they wrote the creative briefs, and they would send that over to us. And what they were looking for us to do was to translate a very loose script into a tangible thing. And so I thought, this is great. And, you know, we got to work with the biggest advertising agencies in the world, right? And work in a multi-billion-dollar brands. So I was like, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And I'm starting to hear this word branding. Branding, what is branding? I don't know. It's like everybody's talking about it. But so it wasn't until I met my former business partner, Jose, who teaches me this framework on how to design and build better websites, that I start to see the connection between understanding the needs of a user, the strategic, like the global business objective. And he would drop all these terms that I was completely unfamiliar with. And he was designing something from the bottom up without a brief from a client, because in the digital space and when in product design, you don't have such briefs given to you. And so I'm learning all this stuff, and I'm seeing this connection parallel my newfound curiosity with building brands. Now, if making commercials was like a super viable business for us and it was plentiful and everything was going great, I probably would not have explored this at all. But I started to see the sign. The sign was that agencies were acquiring production companies like ours to bring them in-house so they can control costs and control creative. I didn't want to go inside, so I'm starting to see, this is not going to work out well for us. The demand for what we're doing is going down. They're starting to just buy talent left and right. So now I can't even compete with them because I want to hire these freelancers and I can't. So I have to become the agency at this point. So it wasn't like there was a thread to pull. It was like, I need to figure out another business model here. If I don't figure this out quick, we're going to be out of business. And so I approached it from that. So I had a mentor who showed me what it was like to do one thing, and I was able to apply that thing to the next thing, which is then I have to start doing business development all over again.
And that's great, because today, to kind of to add those aspects to your business is a little less based on luck, I suppose. I mean, your introduction to Jose, it was kind of those stars aligning. But for anybody that kind of wants to add on skill sets or add on services to what they do, even just looking at the future, like the library of information that's out there is just we're so lucky in this day and age than we were even 5, 6, 7 years ago. So it's great to be able to kind of pick up those skills and kind of add them onto your business. But we also have to be careful there as well, and I kind of, because it's very easy to just add on this and add on that, and building a brand is a long road. Getting a brand to any kind of success is a long road, and it takes a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different skill sets. How far down the road do you take clients, and at what point do you say to yourself, okay, we're still on the brand road to success, but I'm getting outside my sphere of influence here. I'm getting outside my area of expertise. At what point do you let go of their hand, and how do you do that? Do you let go of their hand completely, or do you have a network of partnerships where you say, okay, you need to go over here or you need to go over there? How do you do that? How do you stay in your lane and pass them off in the right way at the same time?
Excellent question. I think we all need to have the wherewithal to recognize what we're good at and what we're not good at all, and to be very clear where those boundaries begin and end. So when we're doing client direct work and they're asking us to help them with a marketing campaign, building out a website to get customers, whatever it is, we understand what the objectives are. We go in, we define that with them. We figure out what's the best path to get this result that they want. And we're facilitating meetings, we're doing strategic conversations, and we're mapping things out. And then we go and do the creative production part, the writing, the designing, the building, and testing. And once we're done with that, we pretty much hand over the project to the client at that point, once we've done all the QA stuff, quality assurance. And then at that point, we kind of wash our hands. So that's the beginning and the end of the service that we provided to our client. They asked something to be built. And to be really transparent and honest about this, I would call in and check in with my clients. How are we doing? Do we need to service the site? Do we need to do anything different? And they would say things like, oh, like for example, this was a commercial real estate thing. Oh, the building's leased. We have 3 more projects for you. So I looked at the client's satisfaction with the work and their desire to give us more work as a sign that whatever they needed us to do, we've done, and I'm ready to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not in that space where we're asking them, did you sell 10,000 t-shirts today? Mm-hmm. We're not at the business management consultant level. We're really trying to build a brand. So that to me is the consumer touch points, the messaging, the look and feel, the usability, the user experience design. Those are the parts that we focused on.
Mm. And if someone was to come to you and say, okay, and this happens a lot. I know a lot of listeners will kind of resonate with this. If a client were to come to you and say, look, the website's great, but we need to increase our traffic, and my business partner has been talking about Facebook ads and Google ads, and can you do that for us? What would be your response if that's not your area of expertise, but you want to hold on to you want to continue to hold the client's hand? How would you do that in an effective way, keeping that relationship going, potentially earning more revenue by holding their hand? How would you manage that?
Great question. What I would do is I would say there's one of two things we can do here. This falls outside of the things that I would feel good about saying to you that we can do. So I can refer a couple of people, and you can vet them and you can figure it out. Or I can manage the project, but I need you to know that I'll be marking up those fees for me to manage it because I'm carrying some risk and it's taking up time for me to do. Which do you prefer? And more often than not, when you're that clear with your clients, they're like, we trust you. You hire whoever, you give us the price. And this is what you're going to learn in business. Most business-minded clients only care about what the bottom line is or the top line. Like, tell me what it costs. I don't really care how we got there. If it's within my budget, I just want you to do it. They didn't care if I marked it up 2, 3, or 5 times what it cost me to do. It didn't matter. So I would say something like, give me a couple of days to do my homework. I owe you an answer. And then from there, we can figure it out. So I'm going to make a bunch of calls. I'm going to get educated really fast. Like, what do you need to know for you to do your job well? How did this go wrong? I'm talking to potential vendors that I'm going to work with, subcontractors. And then I'm going to have like this composite knowledge from talking to 3 different people. You guys send me your numbers, right? I get the numbers in. I'm like, okay, great. I want to work with company B. They seem to be the best fit for us, the right fit of personality, service, quality, etc. And then I go, well, how much risk are we taking on by running this? And we need this to make business sense for us. Otherwise, I'm just going to pass it on. So generally speaking, I would just double the budget.
Yeah.
That's my general rule of thumb.
And I think, what you said before is really important, knowing what your area of expertise is, and kind of thinking ahead of this. Of course, you can learn on your feet. Sometimes you don't ever have to answer a question until the question is asked. But we know the different disciplines within marketing because we're in the world of building brands. So we know that there is SEO, we know that there's Facebook ads, Google ads, content writing, content marketing strategies, Instagram. So if we know that these are the boundaries of what we do, then it's a good idea to understand, to possibly make relationships, and to get a feel for whether or not I'm prepared to continue to hold the client's hand and kind of manage these other areas, or to simply let them go and have those independent relationships and maybe kind of earn some more revenue through referrals there. But I think understanding where that boundary is and kind of thinking ahead of that is, it's really beneficial just to have that clear idea and that focus of what your area of expertise is, so you can kind of stay confident that this is your lane and, we're good at this, and you throw your kind of confidence behind that. If you had to kind of go back, all right, let's say I stripped you of your Christo title, I stripped you of all of your networks and the future, and all you're left with is your raw talent. Nobody knows who you are, and you had to go out and start again from scratch. What would be the first, maybe a few things that you would do, maybe 2, 3, 4 things that you would do to build a successful agency?
Okay. Can I assume that I know what kind of business I want to build?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm not going to build an education company. I'm going to build like a service studio. Is that the idea?
Yeah. So an agency, whether that's a design agency. Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to have to stand up a website really fast. And I'm going to just put some really thought-provoking copy in there to get people to stand up and notice, like, this is a little bit different, because I don't want to use cookie cutter copy. And so I would spend some of my money sketching out some ideas and then hiring a really great copywriter to really make it sound unique in the market space. I don't want to say we're a visual communications company working with innovative companies. That doesn't make any sense to anybody.
Yeah.
So that's generic, that's boring, there's no personality, right? And so I want to start to craft the brand voice really quickly. I want to target a few people I want to work with. I'd probably jump on LinkedIn and start following all their content, literally follow them on every social platform that they have, and start to comment on it so that there is some name and familiarity that I'm trying to build with them, so that eventually when I reach out to them, they're going to be like, yeah, I kind of recognize you. How do I know you? And there's that effect, right?
Yeah.
Something else I'm going to do is I'm going to get on the social platforms. Right now, I'd probably get on LinkedIn, Instagram, and I'll start making some YouTube content as a form of content marketing. And what I want to do is put in the work to build authority. And the way that you build authority is you have to articulate your thinking. Yep. And doing a combination of a couple of those things, about a month in, I think I'm ready to do a warm or cold outreach to them and say, I'm new in this field. I love what you do. I have some ideas on perhaps how you could execute on X, Y, and Z. If this warrants a conversation, I'd love to chat with you. If I get 0 responses from them, I would say something different. I would say, like, what are you doing for lunch next week? I'd love to take you out and pick your brain. So that way you move away from asking them for work and asking them for advice, and everybody's got to eat.
Yeah. And this is stuff that's so applicable and so it's so within the reach of everybody. Nothing you said there leans on a skill set that nobody else has. getting a website up. I mean, most of us know how to do that. If you don't, you can easily find somebody to do that. We're not all killer copywriters, but knowing that we need to have something different and something compelling, we can reach out and get some help there as well. And it's really about kind of tapping into the resources that are available to you, and being resourceful to go out and get those first few clients. And look, there's been so many little kind of nuggets of gold throughout this conversation that and this is something that I always remember. I remember seeing the Futur for the first time. I think you guys had like 500,000 followers the first time I saw you, and I was like, where have these guys been? This is what was needed like 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so there's so much the value that we can take now, and things that we can kind of implement straight away. And it's really just about being resourceful and then taking action. Too many of us get caught up on analysis paralysis of just kind of absorbing content without really taking action. So I think sometimes just the simple things done are better than not done at all. In terms of the future, the future of the future, I've heard you talk about this utopia place where you just where you buy this building and it's full of creatives and everybody collaborates, and it sounds like this awesome place to be. What's the future of the future, and what are you working on now?
Great question. So the future of the future is where I don't have to worry about money. I have an amazing team that helps me to write content, to author courses, and the teachers that we're able to onboard are world class because we have an amazing infrastructure so that we become the destination for any author or content course creator to publish their content. Whoever you think of as your top publisher in the business book space, we want to be them. So HarperCollins, or maybe for design books, you might like Penguin, or any one of those things. We want to be the premier publisher of content, like the Netflix of business design education. That's where we want to be, because what I want to do is use the money and the revenue that we generate from that to start to make what we do more accessible, to make it farther reaching, and so that everyone can experience a hybrid learning environment where some of it's done online and some of it's done in person. And I think that's where the magic is. So I'm not against brick and mortar systems. I just don't want to be solely reliant on those forms of teaching. Because as you know, in the last 2 years, it's been really tough on all of us from a social human to human interaction connection thing. And I think it's highlighted how much we need that to maintain a healthy mindset. We just need that. So the future is some kind of school you've never been to, where there's an amazing theater and a stage for people to present, production facilities, maker space, and place for you to be around other creators, that you just get inspired by just walking into space and bumping into people, rubbing elbows with folks, and being able to huddle around some luminary that's going to speak about something, and then you can just sit there at the teacher's feet and learn from them. Getting back to old school oration and teaching, that excites me so much.
Mate, you're tapping into the nostalgia there. You're tapping into all of these emotional needs that we have now. It's brilliant, and it's a vision that's it's inspiring. It's visionary. It's great, and I think most definitely a massive gap has already been filled. And it's being filled by many different people in many different places. And I think maybe the future will become kind of a benchmark for other industries to kind of do their own thing, and to kind of, whether it's, I don't know, just pick another industries out of thin air, like human resources. It's probably not a good example, but, other spaces to kind of inspire other leaders within those spaces to kind of go out and kind of be the leaders for those industries. So so in terms of the future, obviously there are a lot of kind of entry level products and stuff like that, but you've been working on some coaching as well, kind of top tier coaching.
Mhm.
Tell us a bit about that.
Sure. We have I think products at every price point, including free. Most of the content that we create is free, the vast majority of it. And at the very opposite end of that is what I would consider everything I've learned in the last 25 years in running two different businesses, kind of condensed down into an 8-week cohort. It's called the Business Bootcamp. It's not expensive, but relative to the value of what you get, I think it's tremendous. It's a $5,000 program. And before everyone like runs screaming for the door, just keep in mind that I worked with a business coach for 13 years. I've spent over $250,000 just getting trained myself. And there's theory, like what you learn in books, which I've done a lot of. There's talking to the masters, which I've done as well. And then there is getting one-on-one mentorship. And then the actual application, like running a business, trying out an idea and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and being in some of the most demanding environments, because I work in the entertainment capital of the world. I work in Los Angeles,
Mm.
and they're just sharks everywhere. And if you don't know how to run a business, you don't know how to talk to clients and to present creative, you're not going to survive for very long. And
Mm.
what I've done is put together this program. I'm hoping that people who are at that stage where they need to scale their business from say $100,000 to 250,000 or into the millions, I think I can help you. And if it's a right fit for someone, I do encourage you to check us out.
Chris, thank you so much for taking the time on the show. As I said before, I'll probably watch this episode back myself and just got to take notes on the episode because there's so much gold in there. You've been doing such a great service for the industry, and I've been loving to see the growth of the future. And now I've had the privilege to have a chat with you. And as I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show.
Thank you so much. The pleasure and the honor is all mine. Thank you.